One.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I trust your Sunday is going beautifully, and I'm so honored and privileged that you've decided to spend this afternoon with us. My name is Teslyn Henry King, and on behalf of Riverside Community Health Foundation, Healthy Heritage Movement, San Bernardino County Department of Public Health Nutrition Program, and Just Move Consulting, I would like to welcome you to our My Hair, My Health conference and our 10-year anniversary. We had hoped to meet in person this year, but unfortunately circumstances did not allow for that. We are still in the midst of COVID-19 and adjusting to our new normal, so to speak. And we've experienced so many different challenges over the past couple of years, those things related to COVID and all the extenuating circumstances that come along with that, and the racism that we've seen play out even more so in the last few years. And so we wanted to create a space to just make sure we had an opportunity to talk about it. This year's theme is Let's Talk About It from the Roots. And we've created this space specifically to have some dialogue, detangle some of those collective experiences and emotions and challenges, and then to move into a space where we can reimagine our crowns with two amazing panels. By way of housekeeping, just so you know, in addition to our panels, we have a virtual vendor spotlight page, which we encourage you to visit. It includes some of your favorite My Hair, My Health vendors. And to navigate to the page on a mobile device, click the three lines at the top of the page and select the Vendor Spotlight tab. If you're on a computer, click the Vendor Spotlight tab above. We also want to invite you to visit our video library, where you will find videos from last year's My Hair, My Health conference, and the playlist includes topics such as mental health, nutrition, hair care tips, and some physical activity videos. To access the video library on a mobile device, again, click the three lines at the top of the page, select the video library tab, and then select the videos you would like to view. If you're on a computer, click the video library tab above, and then select the videos you're interested in. And if you need any type of support accessing any of this information, any of the talks, or you just want to send us your feedback, please do so by emailing us at Allita, A-L-L-I-T-A, at rchf.org. Now, for our first panel, we will address how stress, anxiety, and trauma affects one's health. During this session, our panelists will help us detangle some of our emotions we have experienced, and we'll explore how these emotions impact us in different ways. Keep in mind, this is meant to be a discussion and not a presentation, so please participate. Here's how you can do that. Send us your questions via the chat feature throughout the presentation. And if you have a comment you'd like to add that into the conversation, you can send that too. You can find the live chat box on the top of the screen if you're on a mobile device, or to the right of the screen if you are on your computer. There is an anonymous comment section below the video as well. So please, if you like this talk, click the thumbs up button or drop us a comment to let us know. We really would love to hear from you. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you our panel. First, we have Dr. Eric Walsh. Dr. Walsh was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He is a graduate of the University of Miami School of Medicine and Loma Linda University School of Public Health, where he received his master's and a doctorate in public health. His most important educational experience was his time at Oakwood University, and he has served two US presidents, George W. Bush and Barack Obama, as an advisor on HIV and AIDS. Dr. Walsh has served at several churches as an associate pastor, and he is now a practicing physician and healthcare administrator. He travels the globe speaking on many subjects, and his wife, Jacqueline, is his partner in ministry and his best friend. Join me in welcoming Dr. Eric Walsh. Next, we have Lydia L. Lydia is the CEO of Supplies for Allies, a consultant on allyship, an advocate for women in business. And Lydia is also a best-selling author who speaks on the importance of embracing all aspects of life and approaching each moment with authenticity and hope. Sparked by her daughter catching a few glimpses of the George Floyd murder and the recent events in our nation's capital, Lydia founded Supplies for Allies, the anti-racism platform that provides training, resources, and products on allyship. Her goal is for anti-racism to become so common in everyday life that Supplies for Allies goes out of business. Supplies consults with organizations to be intentional about creating an anti-racism and allyship culture, and also is the home of the allyship calendar. It's one that individuals can subscribe to for daily support on their allyship journey. To learn more, go to suppliesforallies.com. We welcome Miss Lydia L. And last but certainly not least, Kiana. Kiana is 15 years old. She's a native of the Inland Empire and attends Cajon High School. Some of the extracurricular activities that she enjoys includes the Link Crew Yearbook and the STEP team. She is also currently the secretary of the Black Student Union at her high school. Once she graduates, Kiana plans on attending an HBCU where she will earn a Bachelor of Science degree to move forward in her career of either becoming an athletic trainer or a pediatrician. One of her most prized possessions is her hair, and it has been a long journey to get it to where it is now, and it's going to be a longer journey, she says, to get it to where she wants it to be. But for Kiana, it's most important for little Black girls to know and see the beauty in their natural hair, and to grow up knowing that America's beauty standard is not an inclusive one, but that Black girls and Black women should create their own standards of beauty and be proud of who they naturally are. Welcome, Kiana. So as you can see, we have 3 dynamic persons joining us today, and I hope you're already putting into chat some of your questions to guide us in our conversation. And while you do that, I'll get started with a question that we have here related to, you guessed it, COVID. It's still very prevalent and present in our daily lives. And so when we think about COVID-19, the trauma that has ensued as a result, and you think about how it's impacted you and others in the Black community, how has it changed your perspective about life priorities? And I'll leave that for anyone to jump in and respond.
I guess I'll go first. Let me say that this, as a physician, COVID has really been very, very stressful, and having to give people the bad news that their relatives are either not doing well, or even worse in certain cases, has not been easy. One of the things that COVID, people keep saying, has unearthed is the fact that there are health disparities among our people, and that this pandemic has really shown, and if you go back to where it hit hard first in New York, in the boroughs like the Bronx, it really decimated Black and Latino communities. And so we saw disproportionately. What was shocking is that it wasn't just in the United States, it panned out all across America, but even in the United Kingdom, we saw the same kind of disparities. And that was kind of shocking. So the question had a lot to was talking about priorities. I think the first thing COVID does is it percolates back to the top the priority of ending health disparities, and especially those driven by race. If you ever see our show, I have a show called Slave Food that Dr. Batista and I do, and we talk a lot about the intersection between the stress of racism, the stress of life, how we live, and how that translates to disease. Racism is an often unaccounted for stress. And when we're stressed, we release cortisol, stress hormone. And when that hormone gets to high levels in our body for a long period of time, our body actually develops resistance to our own cortisol. The problem with that is then our bodies no longer have the ability to actually turn off the inflammation system in our immune system. So COVID has taught us that the irony is the more stressed out you become about COVID, the more susceptible you are to COVID. So our priorities have to go back to ending racism, ending health disparities, but also a lot of us really need to learn how to manage our stress better eat so that we are less in an inflammatory state, and connect to others so that we have the kind of support systems that we need in a pandemic. Don't social distance, physical distance. That's what I've been saying all along, because you still need your social supports.
That is awesome. Thank you, Dr. Walsh. You dropped a lot of little gems in there. And you spoke to racism as the unaccounted for stress. And it's one that's prevalent in our communities for sure. Lydia, do you want to touch on racism? I know that's something you are extremely interested in and working to help eliminate. Will you share how you're doing that and how you got to this point in your life and career based on racism?
Man, sure. Firstly, let me just say thank you to everybody in the My Hair, My Health leadership team for this opportunity, and really the opportunity to be able to put to words what so many of us are feeling. This conversation is one that has probably just sat in the back of our minds for quite some time, and being able to ascribe words to it is an honor that I do not take lightly. So thank you. Dr. Walsh, he touched on so many things that I would dare say it's not that it's unaccounted for, but it's something that we don't want to acknowledge. For so long, racism has been prevalent. For so long, it is something that was the elephant in the country, forget the room. But we wanted to, and I'm using we in a very broad sense, to figure out other nomenclature for this thing because it is uncomfortable. When it is that I do my work as the founder of Supplies for Allies, that is a social impact company, it wasn't something that I asked for. You know, my ultimate goal, like you've said and shared, is to go out of business so I can actually do something of joy. The reason why a platform like this is necessary is because we still need to make sure that people acknowledge. That's just the first step. Become aware and acknowledge. Then we need people to actually start to do some activation. They need to move. They need to make the changes that are necessary so that the disproportionate stress that has gone to a particular group of people now begins to disseminate and eventually become eliminated throughout the country and the world. And so when we hear words about various activities, I'm sure we have been in spaces where we know that there's something that wasn't right, whether it was a racist remark or a particular way that we were not acknowledged. Those who may not have felt the brunt end of that experience would use words like, oh, that was interesting, or that was weird. We're not calling it out exactly for what it is. And I say that that actually adds to the stress that we are already feeling, because not only now have we had to come to terms with this thing that is happening, but we are in a community of people who choose not to see it. It isn't about the fact that it is not there. It's just that calling that thing that as racism, calling that thing as a particular bias, calling it from the roots of hate where it has begun, now calls for people to be accountable to change. And that is what needs to happen so that everybody can sip from the cup of opportunity without us really getting to a place where we start looking at the things that we need to change. There's absolutely no way that we are going to change it. I myself, the reason why I began this company, as you shared, was because of my daughter. I am 40 years old. So it wasn't that I didn't experience racism until she saw George Floyd last year, but rather I had to now stand flat-footed and say, I don't want to perpetuate a habit that says she has to try and ignore it too. She deserves a world where people are going to be activated for a better change, as opposed to me teaching her how just to swallow these things in silence and only come into our silos of conversations, but rather have a world and opportunity where diversity is first and where she is able to act in the fullness of who she is, whether it's her hair, whether it's her health, whether it's education, whether it's banking. All of these things should be at her fingertips like they are for so many people. So that is what I am attempting to be a part of the change to do. Thank you so much again for having me.
Thank you for that powerful word. This is wonderful, and we've only just begun. I hope the questions are still streaming in. And while they do, Kiana, let's get a youth perspective as we continue to talk about racism and stress. We often forget that these things impact our youth and children as well. How has this impacted you, as Lydia was sharing about the effects that, for example, George Floyd had on her daughter? How have these things impacted you and others in your generation?
Um, I think, it's nothing new, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's not like a new impact, you dig what I'm saying? So it's kind of like something I've already not gotten used to, I guess you could say, but it's like, it's not new, So it hurts, you know what I'm saying? Like, and it's really sad to see. But I guess it impacts us in a way, like, that we're scared like everyone else is, and we want to help and see change. And, there's not always, it's not always easy to do that with us being so young, you know what I'm saying? Like last year when they were protesting, I did go to a protest actually, but, you want to do so much more than go to a protest and, protest, you think what I'm saying? But you want to do so much more and you can't always find, you know what I'm saying? Like you can't always figure out what it is that you want or that what it is that you can do. So yeah.
Thank you for that. In some of the work that I've done over the years, I did work that included various generations looking at their community and things that were wrong and they wanted to see improved. And just like you're saying, even down to my kids in middle school, it was surprising to the adults for them to realize that, you know what, they see the exact same things happening in their communities as the adults do. But like you're saying, our youth might be such that you don't get a chance to speak about it, or you don't know how to put it into words per se. And so what you're saying is important for us as adults and elders in the community to recognize that this isn't just impacting us as adults, but there really is impact on you and other youth. Thank you for sharing that. And so as we continue, I have questions coming in, and one is related to kind of processing traumatic experiences and how do we kind of process collectively all these things that you're talking about related to COVID and racism, and the list can go on and on and on. How do we process that as a Black community?
I guess I will jump in here. The first thing that I want to say in regards to process is that as different as we are in our faces and our physique makeup, that is what we should expect the difference to be for our process. There's no one size fits all. It has been noted in various psychology books where two children can be literally standing in the same place, experiencing the same events, and they come out of it with different things that they need to process. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I found myself on January the 6th in Washington, D.C., only a couple stops from the Capitol. I was there for my daughter's birthday, which was supposed to be a couple days later. And what was intended to be a celebratory trip really became one of major trauma for me. The night that the events transpired, so many of those that you saw in the videos at the Capitol were returning to the hotel that I was staying in, and I did not realize. And so going through that particular event, I had to walk through a crowd of these people, and I wasn't really sure what to do at the time, except to make sure that I stayed protected. So quite honestly, when I returned back to California was when I even realized there was something to process, because at the time I was just trying to survive. At the time, I was just trying to make sure that my daughter and I made it out of there, trying to figure out what we needed to do, because I wasn't even sure, when we speak about racism, what I was fighting, right? I couldn't quite put something on it, but I knew that danger was imminent. And so when I speak of process, just from my perspective, my daughter, who went through that particular experience, she's fine. You know, I made sure that she had somebody she needed to talk to. I definitely advocate for therapy, but her way of processing that and mine were completely different. And I think a big part as a community that we need to think about when we speak of process is giving people the mutual respect and leeway to experience and process the way that they need to, and making sure that they know that it's something that we advocate for. I advocate for your healing. I advocate for your wholeness. I advocate for you to do what is necessary, what is your right to get better. You do not have to put this to the side. You do not have to give it a moment before you come back to it later because you think somebody else needs it more than you. As they have said time and time again on an airplane, you need to put on your own mask first. And this is your right. This is not a privilege. Just in the same way that we have rights to opportunities, you have the right to process. And that ultimately is what I believe we need to do as a community, is really start and push that particular message. Thank you.
Beautiful. Anyone want to add to that?
I would just jump in and say, I think part of what has to happen now is that we have to also begin to recognize that we have need. So coming back from an experience like that, and I've had many experiences like that in my life, where you're right, in the moment, you don't even know how to put your finger on what's happening. And later on, you realize that you were in at the least, a hostile environment. And it's off-putting because, especially being born and raised in this country, you shouldn't feel like there are events, places, or times that you don't belong in. And that's part of it. And even earlier when I said, unaccounted for, when I say unaccounted for, what racism is unaccounted for, I mean in that medical world. When you go to your doctor, how many times does your doctor ask you, how are you handling society, the burden of race on society, that and how it impacts you? And if you asked everybody that, you'd find that you get different answers. The reason this stuff has to be processed is that there are good studies that show when Black women speak, are asked about experiences of racism similar to what Lydia just described, those women who especially chronically go through those experiences are far more likely to develop diabetes, breast cancer, and many other illnesses. The mind-body connection is powerful. So when we go into a mindset of survival, it actually can take a toll on us physically. And this is what we have to begin to do away with. And one of the reasons why communities like church, even sororities, fraternities, all of the different things Black people joined and do, one of the reasons all of these things were so helpful and protective is because it gave you a place where you could let your guard down. It gave you a place where you could express the fact that you had been traumatized, and people who would be able to sympathize with you. And as some of that evaporates in our society, we have to be very intentional. None of it replaces professional therapy, in my opinion, but I believe we still have to be very intentional to finding those safe places where we can have these discussions. Because I just finished an executive leadership training with one of the best companies in the country, and it was for African Americans. And literally on every small group, everyone was like, "Man, it feels so good to just be able to say this because I'm the only Black person in the room at work all the time." And I think it's important that we create these safe spaces and be intentional about it, especially during a pandemic, especially.
Thank you for that. That reminds me of an article I read not too long ago of a woman sharing her experience in the medical community, feeling stressed and overwhelmed and going to the doctor and sharing this and hearing the doctor respond, "Well, it sounds like you're a strong Black woman. Keep doing what you're doing." But no, that's the problem. That what you're saying is so true. The survival mode is killing us, and we want to go from survival to actually living our best life and thriving. And community is one way to help us move through that process. Thank you so much for that. We do have comments coming in. Go
I do
ahead.
want to plug this one quick thing in, and that is, and my mother is a prime example of this, but we've also created this idea of the Black Superwoman.
Mhm.
And obviously, I can tell you by all of my mother's accomplishments and all that she did, by my definition, she was Superwoman. But being Superwoman doesn't mean you don't have kryptonite and that you don't need time to replenish yourself. And unfortunately, you've seen this recently. Last show we just did on slave food, we talked about Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka and the things that they went through, and the pressures that are put on us as individuals. And those are celebrity famous people. But this is what happens to Black women every day, all day. You're expected to be an incredible mother, perform amazingly at work, perform amazingly in your community. You're supposed to be defender, protector, provider. There's so much that is asked of Black women, and a lot of times, like that doctor, you just assume that their strength means they can't be traumatized. And those are two mutually exclusive things. You can be strong, survive, and even thrive, and still be damaged and hurt and scarred. And so we've got to make sure we pull those apart now, feed the strength, but also heal the wounds.
I love that. Feed the strength and heal the wounds. Whew. How do we do that? I do have some comments coming in I just want to share so you guys are aware. Lanny says, yes, dispel the lack of accountability and let's work together on solutions. And Sharon is also saying, what is something that each one of us can do to make a change? So I'll throw that up to you guys.
That's a good question. I want to touch on that in relation to your first initial question about priorities. I definitely subscribed for quite some time to the notion that I was supposed to be this strong Black woman and that everything that I was to do was to be perfect because the margin of error did not exist. Right? There was no recovery. There was no any of that. I felt like every shot was my one shot. When we have stories and analogies of, if you're the first one in the room, then that pressure to make sure that you perform to the highest of whatever height it is for that particular opportunity is magnified because you do not want to disappoint. You do not want to let anybody down. But when it comes to priorities, I think what the pandemic has done is reset the entire globe to now, instead of having a priority list, to understand the importance of a maintenance list. There are things that should be maintained no matter what changes in terms of priorities. For example, today, my priority was to make sure that I got here on time and that I looked half decent to be able to come and share the little bit that I had with the community. What it is that I have to maintain always is that I eat a quality meal for breakfast. I'm still working on it. That my daughter ate something for breakfast, that I made sure that she had her water, that I made sure that she felt loved when she got up this morning. Those are the things that we need to maintain. And I think prior to the pandemic, we were always about priorities. It was climbing the corporate ladder or making sure we closed the deal or making sure whatever that thing is we were attaining to, the goal probably took precedence over all of the things that we needed to maintain. But without us maintaining these particular areas, family, relationships, our health, you can't do any of the things on your priority list. So in essence, what needs to change is the fact that we need to give priority to our maintenance, to making sure that we take care of ourselves. To this notion of juggling so many balls, I feel like that also adds to, especially for women, this can you have it all? The truth of the matter is some of the balls are plastic. They can drop, they will bounce, you can pick them back up and you can keep trying to keep it going. But when you feel like you have to just keep doing and keep performing, then that has an adverse effect on who you are. We are human beings, not human doings. And I feel like there is added pressure as Black people that we have to do, that we have to perform because of this scarcity mindset that has been put on us, that opportunity is not available for all of us equally and that we can all rise together. That is what I think needs to change. And it's going to take some work because there'll be some discomfort with those who have to give up some equity so that we can have it. but it is also our birthright.
And that brings to mind for me the whole concept of normal, because I hear that word bandied about so much more than I've heard before. As it relates to COVID, I guess the new normal is the thing. But when you think in terms of normal, I mean, what is it really? All those things prior to the pandemic, are those normal? The way we were treated as Blacks, all the things you're describing, our economy, our health, all those things were normal. Do I want to return to that, or do I want something different? No, I want something different, something new. And so that's what I kind of hear you saying in those comments, Lydia and Dr. Walsh. So thank you for that. We are moving into the new, the different, and the equalizing the playing field for everyone. And so I do have, go ahead.
I would say this real quick. Every crisis is an opportunity for growth. Every crisis is an opportunity for growth. And this pandemic, in my opinion, and everything that's happened is an opportunity for us to come together as a people and as a community to build some better things and some foundationally better things. And I think just listening to Lydia and hearing the work that she does, I think it's going to be pioneers like her that are going to do a lot of this building of this newness. It has to be grassroots and it has to be altruistic. And I don't think we accept going back to the way things were. I think we have to believe now that we can make improvements and build a better world for our children. And that's really what we have to be about at this point.
Absolutely. And I have a question that came in for you, Miss Kiana. And it's from, oh, I can't see who it's from, but as a young lady in this world and in the leadership that you are at your school, how are you making sure that you get a seat at the table so that your voice can be a contributor in the process? So what would you say to other young people so that they too, like you, have a seat at the table?
I think that, I guess I would say to make sure that you're known, you know what I'm saying, like to where you could be heard. For example, I got really close with my coach. I don't play no sport, but my Quizbo coach. I don't know if I know what that is, but yeah, so I got really close with him. So to make sure that you have like a support system, you know what I'm saying, to help you, and you know, people who know you to what's the word? Vouch for you, you know what I'm saying, and then what you're doing, so where that you could be where you want to be. It's going to be a lot easier if you have yourself a support system to get you to where, it's to help you to get you to where you go.
Yes, I hear you saying making sure that there's an adult, an ally that you can trust and speak to and share things with, and that person can indeed help to ensure that you have the chance to voice those opinions and be at the table, as was asked in this question. So thank you, Kiana. We've got a follow-up question for the panel from Erin. And it says, while facing several issues within our existence, and then publicly, socially, there are so many questions, including microaggression, that has become almost an everyday thing. Can you all speak to which is worse? Is it outright racism or some of those kind of subversive acts? And since we can't erase it all tomorrow, what are a few things that we can either do to redirect those comments in a way that's productive and leads to our recovery if nothing changes? Did you guys get all that? Okay, good. And can someone speak to that?
I'll say a couple things, and Dr. Walsh, please feel free to jump in at any moment, because that was a loaded question. The first thing that I feel in regards to which is worse is the microaggressions. And it is because it is a lot easier to see what I am fighting than to have to first figure out if there is a fight to be had in the first place, and then figure out how to combat it. I think that outright racism is definitely damaging and just as difficult. but those microaggressions. So one of the things that was shared by, I was trying to look it up, this lady on Twitter, she said that when the protests were happening, a lot of the narrative was, oh, they're looters, right? It went from them being protesters to being looters. And this lady, I'll find the name and share with you, but she shared on Twitter and said, more looting has happened in the boardrooms than on your boardwalk. And what was meant by that was, so often people of color have had to realize that they were offered less, right? We just had National Black Women's Pay Day, where it was shown that on average, a Black person, a Black woman, has to work 7 months longer to get the same income as her white male counterpart. And there are various studies that talk to the disparity of income. So those types of microaggressions, where you are passed over time and time again for a promotion, and they make mention of things like you need more mentorship, but someone else can come in with minimal experience after you, and you see them rising before you. LinkedIn has done various conversations called a conversation for change, if you look up that hashtag, where they speak to the experiences that people of color have had, Black people, in this instance. And this is where you see the nomenclature like, oh, well, that was interesting, and I'm really sorry, as opposed to people really calling out what has happened, because once you do again, there is now a reckoning for true accountability. So I'll stop there and see what Dr. Walsh has to say, but I think microaggressions can be pretty rough.
Yeah, I would agree. I think obviously I've seen some pretty extreme racism in my days. One of the stories is when I was in Homestead, Florida, and a truck with a Confederate flag threw a Molotov cocktail under a car full of a Black family's car as we were running back. I was just a kid running back from a party with my cousin to his house. And you know, in my life, especially living in the South, I saw a lot of little incidences like that. Nothing ever major, but enough that it was traumatizing. When you get a big stressful experience like that, the way our bodies are designed is that you get a massive stress response. You release cortisol, adrenaline, you go into fight or flight, you go up and you come back down. And your body's able to reset and go from being driven by cortisol to back to like oxytocin, and you get to reset, serotonin, all kinds of things happen to put you back in balance. Not that it doesn't leave a scar, but you get to go back into balance. When it's microaggression and you feel it, you realize it, especially if you can't pinpoint it, that leaves you in that fight or flight place all the time. And that's why it's so damaging, because now you have chronic, as I mentioned earlier, chronic release of cortisol. And what happens when you're in a chronic state of fight or flight? Because people are always making things, one person at a job I had, I won't say where, said once, met a Black woman and said, "Oh, I'm so glad you have a name I can pronounce." I remember being at a place that in Southern California working, and one of the administrators saying, we had a couple amazing Black female physicians that worked for us, and there was a third I was trying to hire, and saying, "No, we don't need any more angry Black women working here." So when you get these, it's not a Molotov cocktail under the car. Nobody burned a cross in your front lawn or, called you the N-word, all of which, except for the cross, I've seen and heard. But it's different. It's chronic. And so you never come back down. So what happens when you're in a state of fight or flight? Well, your blood pressure has to go up in order to pump blood to your brain so you can think. Your heart rate is always higher. Blood is shunted away from your digestive tract to your muscles so you can fight or run. Long term, your liver makes sugar. It can even make fat. So you're predisposed now to diabetes, high blood pressure, strokes, heart attacks. All these things change. And probably one of the biggest one is, as we say in the Slave Food Project, stressed equals dessert spelled backwards. So you're stressed, desserts is the opposite. So what happens now? Comfort foods actually start to taste better. And what do they do to have us self-medicate against our constant state of stress? Well, they line our neighborhoods with McDonald's and Burger King, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and all kinds of junk food, fast food, highly processed, high in animal proteins and fats, and I could go on and on and on. But this is what they do, and so that bite into that French fry, that bite into that honey bun, that sip of that soda, all of it actually feels better when you're chronically stressed than it would have if you are in your normal place, making it more difficult for you to actually choose, especially when you consider the environment a healthy lifestyle. So the microaggressions, back to the question, really can be super damaging because they are micro and they're consistent and they leave you in a bad, stressful, psychological place. Now, she also has said something about how do we redirect this. This is where you have to call things out. Things have to be recognized, pointed out, and said. Somebody's got to say, it's offensive that you would say to me, that I have a name that you can pronounce. Every name is pronounceable if you take the time to pronounce it, right? I mean, I've learned names from all kinds of languages if I just stop and take the time to try and learn the name. And if I can't, I can respectfully, try and find a way to say something, to call a person by a name they respect. But you have to start to step in and not allow the microaggressions to persist. You've also got to learn how to not overreact, right? So you've got to actually learn to pull things back and sometimes realize the people that we're dealing with are ignorant. And there's no excuse. Some of them are intentional, don't get me wrong. Some of them know exactly what they're saying, but the biblical kind of mandate around forgiveness is I forgive people just as much because it liberates me as it is because I'm being a good person. So we've got to find ways to not hold some of this stuff. And this goes back to community where we can share and you realize we're not alone, but we have to point it out. I mean, there's a fight to be had at the same time.
And to follow up with that, Lanny had another question, and that was, how do you deal with the microaggressions in the workplace? And what do you suggest one is to do if they're dealing with something like that?
So there is an article, I was going to share this before, and this is not going to be the prescription for all microaggressions in the workplace, but there is an article in the Harvard Business Review called Stop Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome. It's written by, and I want to try and get this name right, Ruchika Tulshyan and Jodi Ann Burry. Everyone should go and read that because it starts out with the conversation of the fact that so often we women are told the reason why we are doubting ourselves is because we may feel like we don't belong, right? That imposter syndrome says you aren't supposed to be where you are. Where in actuality, the article goes on to say, no, it isn't that you don't feel like you belong, but you've been dealing with microaggressions for so long that you are afraid of dealing with them again. And then the article further breaks it down into the disparities that people of color, Black women have felt where this is even more exacerbated in those particular instances. So how do you deal with it at the workplace? Number one, you have to put aside the constant need for apology. You no longer have to apologize for who you are. Just being able to stand in the confidence that your community, I'm talking about the corporate community, knows that you are not going to say, oh, I'm so thankful constantly of being in the position that you worked to get in, is automatically going to set the precedence and tone as to how much microaggression you're willing to take. Secondly, I think in a professional manner, as to what Dr. Walsh said, there needs to be well acknowledged notice that you will call out what needs to be called out. It needs to be done in an appropriate way because oftentimes the person who has been put in this victimized situation, if you call it out in a manner that now really blows everything up, you will probably get more of an adverse reaction than the change that you were initially trying to disseminate throughout your particular organization. So you're going to have to do the follow-up, the side conversation, the email, the, pulling to the side, all of those things, but you need to make sure that you address it, because we need more people who are addressing it. And then lastly, where I think this is really important, and this is something that Kiana brought up when she talked about how important her coach was, we really need to explain and share the importance of sponsorship, of mentorship, and of allyship when we talk about corporate culture. A sponsor is somebody who sees your potential and sees where you are and is going to speak for you in places where you are not, and speak up when it might be that you can't. So you shouldn't be the only person that's calling out that microaggression. There should be a whole community of people in that corporate setting that are going to do that as well, because that is saying we do not take that type of behavior here. If Dr. Walsh was the only person that heard that comment about the name pronunciation and he spoke up, then that was absolutely what was to happen. But if there was a group of doctors and one doctor made that comment, everybody should have been turned off and made sure to make a comment about the fact that we do not take that type of behavior in this organization. We are looking for inclusivity, and everybody needs to make sure they are an active participant in bringing people to the table. Lastly, understand that that table, you didn't just pull up a seat, you helped to build it. So you deserve to be in the very room that you are in. And that, to me, is how we will begin to change microaggressions.
The only thing I would add is that I think in most professional settings, you should find some people who are also advocates, who are allies, and they don't have to look like you in this case. In fact, sometimes it's better that they don't, who will also speak up for you. Most companies now have diversity and inclusion chief, vice presidents or chief whatever officers or whatever. Find those people and be able to relate this to them, because then they can incorporate some of this in their annual training and other things like that as well. But sometimes people have to be called out as individuals, as was just said, and sometimes it's good to have an ally to help you navigate that. Because one of the things, especially for Black women, it's really unfortunate. If you speak up and defend yourself, people are even more likely to say you're an angry Black woman. Like it's a bizarre thing, and because Black women do so well, in general, a lot of times you tippy-toe, you're walking on eggshells because you're afraid to hit some stereotype. So you're more polite. You're like overly polite, overly refined in the workplace, when other people are allowed to just relax and be themselves. And that's a stress as well. So you got to find the allies and be able to have someone else kind of go in and help you navigate some of these tough things. Because sometimes it's really difficult to speak to some of these people because they'll try and retaliate and so forth.
Absolutely true. And Sharon also suggested writing an anonymous letter to administration as another means to share this with persons. Now, we talked a lot about stress, and thank you, Dr. Walsh, for sharing with us the impact on our health, our physical bodies. And does that extend to our hair, since we are talking about my hair, my health?
Absolutely. I would tell you that the studies are coming out now that actually those who are stressed, and we already know this, you gray your hair faster. Studies have come out to show that. It not only does it gray your hair faster, it can actually accelerate hair loss when you're chronically stressed, because your body's going to prioritize if you're chronically stressed, and keeping your hair drops into lower priority over other bodily functions if you're chronically stressed. So this is one of the reasons why, in order to blunt the effect of stress, everyone should have an active workout program. Never think you're going to work out to lose weight. That is a fallacy, and it's not the reason you work out. You work out to have the kind of mind that is able to make the decisions that will help you to lose weight, to relieve your stress and boost your metabolism, of course. But that's what it's about. The other way that this exercise helps you is sweat. Sweat is one of the best ways to detoxify. A lot of people, not just women, but a lot of people don't want to sweat. It's just like, oh, yuck, I'm sweaty. Sweat isn't your skin is your largest organ. Phenomenal way to detoxify is to go out and sweat a whole lot. All kind of stuffs come out of your pore that are difficult to actually come up through your liver or your kidneys. And the other thing I would just say about hair is when you're chronically stressed, a lot of times you pay less attention to your hair. Just cognitively, other things take precedence. So, don't do that. And the last thing I'll say about it, let me throw this in there, is understand that your hair is beautiful just the way it is. One of the stressors especially on Black women, is we've watched people with hair that does not look like ours for so long. I was raised believing nappy hair was a bad thing, and I was teased for having nappy hair. And I'll never forget when what was the name of the group? Naughty by Nature had a line where they said, "I'm happy to be nappy," and I was like, man, all these years, I'm so glad somebody said that. So if you don't want to stress over your hair, accept it. Your hair is beautiful. It's different. It's unique in the whole planet. That's a part of what you have to internalize and love about yourself. And I want to say for Kiana, when I look at her hair is gorgeous. It's beautiful. When she came on camera, I instantly saw her hair and I was like, man, I sure wish I could do that again. I sure do. That looks so amazing. And I want everyone to understand that your hair, how you view your hair, has a lot to do with how your hair will grow. How you psychologically look at your hair is a lot about how your hair will grow.
And Kiana, I want for you to comment on that, because we are all digging that beautiful afro. And I know you shared that's been a journey. Can you talk to us about that for a couple of minutes before we wrap up?
Yes, ma'am. So when I was in the 5th grade, I started to wear my hair out. When growing up, you know what I'm saying, my mom and my grandparents, they taught me, like, my hair is nice. Like, my hair is beautiful. Like, it's nothing I should be ashamed of, to love my hair. So I never grew up, disliking my hair or my skin or anything like that. And then in the 5th grade, I started wearing my hair out. And then in the 8th grade, I don't even know what to call it, but I guess I got psoriasis. I guess I don't know the word to say. But anyway, yeah, I had psoriasis. So it was in my hair and on my body. So it was before we had got medicine for it. So it was really bad in my hair. So I lost a lot of my hair, and it was like, really hard for me. And then after I got medicine, the medicine, it helped my scalp, you know what I'm saying? But it didn't help me grow the hair back. So it wasn't like, it didn't help with the hair growth. So it kind of stunted the growth, but it was getting my scalp together. And then I got me what's the word? I found something that worked for my hair, a process that worked for my hair, to get it to where it is now, you know what I'm saying? Which again, isn't where I want it to be. And I don't think it's where it was before, but it's almost there. Yeah.
If you have a process you can bottle, you can get very wealthy. It sounds like you might be on the way to being a billionaire.
It's beautiful. It's
absolutely beautiful. So Dr. Walsh is right. And in addition to being a pediatrician and physical therapist? I know I got that wrong. Forgive me. You can have a side business selling that product, whatever it was you did, that process, because it is absolutely beautiful. And we thank you so much for sharing your journey and for joining us. It is about time. We're getting close to our end to wrap up this discussion. But before we do, one last question for all of you. This is something coming from parents. The state of the world really scares me, and I know life as we know it won't go back to normal. So what do you think is the best way to keep things somewhat normal and stable for kids during these times?
I mean, I'll be quick. For my daughter, I am her steady state. As long as I am there, she believes that everything will be all right, even when I'm not, and even when things are not. She knows that the love that we have is enough.
And that's all you really have to say. I mean, that really is it. And I would only add that in that is routine and consistency. Kids like to know that they're in a stable environment. If you give them that, no matter what's going on in the rest of the world, every night, whatever routine you have, as best you can, hold on to that routine. If you have a game night, keep your game night the best you can. And the child will actually understand that the world might be changing, but this bond, just as she just said, this bond is not changing, and this bond is what matters.
And Kiana, what would you say on behalf of youth? What is it that adults need to know and the things that adults need to do to help keep things stable for you as youth?
Um, as well as, I mean, consistency for sure, because that's what the thing I was gonna say, but also understanding that we need y'all to listen, you know what I'm saying, to what we're saying, because parents sometimes or adults sometimes think because, or I don't know why they think, but they think that, you know, I'm an adult, so I understand what you got going on, but you know, you was a kid umpteen years ago, you dig what I'm saying? So it's gonna be different from what we got going on. So consistency and then listening and actually listening to us.
Thank you for that. I hope everyone heard that. We need to listen to our youth and create that space where they can just be open and honest and share what's on their hearts and their minds. Thank you so much, Kiana. And with that, we are going to thank all three of our panelists. Thank you so much, Dr. Walsh. Thank you, Lydia. Thank you, Kiana, for this incredible discussion. I heard a few things resonate over and over as we talked related to stress, and it's an underlying condition that we all experience and we all have to undergo related to trauma, related to disease processes. It doesn't go away. And so things that we can do to help dispel that is to have a really healthy diet that includes plant foods. We also exercise, and that I heard was a must to help to dispel some of that stress. And then community, having a space where we can just let our guards down and be us, having a sister circle, family, close friends, whatever the case may be, so that we can just be free to be us. And then I heard from you, Kiana, to just include our youth in that and listen, be an opening ear, not judgmental, just listen to hear what it is they have to say. And then together, as we were saying earlier, we can all work towards the solutions that we hope to see in this world that will make it right and make it better for our kids to live in. And so as we close this session out, thank you to our audience for those great questions, those great comments. We appreciate them all. I want you guys to know that registration is still open and will remain open until September 5th, so that all of the content through the conference today will be available to you on the Hay Summit platform. Be sure to share this virtual conference with others, persons who may not have been here today. You've heard something that you know they need to hear. Please share. If you want to know more about My Hair, My Health, be sure to follow us on Instagram at myhair_myhealth and follow us on Facebook at My Hair, My Health. Now, if you like to win prizes, as we typically do, we have some for you. You have to stick around until the end of the conference to be eligible to win. And you need to look out for a survey in your email at the end of the conference. And when you do, you'll be entered. We want to hear from you how we did. We want to hear anything we can do differently. And when you share that information with us, you will have the chance to win a gift card. Next up, we have fun activities for you to do. They are all available in your speaker section. They include a nutrition break, a physical activity break, as well as a hair break. So you'll learn a little bit more about all of those things. We invite you to check out those videos during this time. And we also want to invite you to check out our vendor spotlight page. You can also visit our video library. But most importantly, we want you to stop, take a break, get up, walk around, grab a healthy snack, grab your water, and then be ready to join us again at our next session, which will go live at 3:45 p.m. And that is Reimagining Your Crown with another 2 dynamic presenters and subject matter experts. To navigate to what's coming up next, you can either click the live icon in the top of your screen when it appears, or you can go back to the program tab and click on the agenda link, which lists all of the conference pieces again, and you can just click on the live portion. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again next year in person, we hope. Until then, bye.